On November 2nd, we have some elections that are going to be extremely important for us to harvest what we have left of our republic. So we can, at that point, we can't do it now, but we can only do it after the election comes. But at that point, that's when we go to work to actually pull America back. Not just take America back, but take America back from where it came. Restore it to the constitutional authority that it's supposed to be under. Not this fake democracy. There's nothing democratic about our government except the way we elect our representatives to represent us in a constitutional republic. And the way to do this is through the issue of state sovereignty. The entire Constitution is completely littered and perforated with the principles of state sovereignty. I'm going to list a few of them right now. And this is what that book back there is all about. And nobody's actually put this stuff together in a book, to my knowledge, until I did it. So you're going to want to get that just so you can have it in your library and you can use it whenever you confront an elected official about something that they're doing that they're not supposed to be doing. And it's also something that you can take to your state representatives and your state senators and let them know that they really have a lot more power than most of them think. They just need a backbone. There's some of them out there, they just need a backbone. Article 1, Section 3 of the United States Constitution points to state sovereignty. Did you know that United States senators used to not be elected? They used to be appointed by our state legislators. Why do you think that is? Here's why. Because United States senators were supposed to go to Washington, D.C. for the sole purpose of representing the sovereignty of their individual state. That's the role of a U.S. senator. They're not there to do the bidding and the will of the American people. Senator McCaskill and Senator Bond are supposed to go to Washington, D.C. to do the bidding and the will of the state of Missouri. That's what it's for. And I can back that up and reinforce it with Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. United States senators, you know what, when the president wants to have a treaty and put a treaty in force, he can only do that with the approval of the United States Senate, not Congress, not the House of Reps, just the Senate. And here's the reason. Because a treaty, really, to some extent or another, is always a compromise of national sovereignty. It is us flaking away at our national sovereignty so we can get on par with another country in order to meet the objectives and the desires that we want to meet. So to some extent or another, a treaty is going to be some sort of compromise of our national sovereignty. Well, the only way we can do that is with the advice and consent of the United States Senate. Because if the president wants to compromise national sovereignty, the states are supposed to have a say in whether or not they want to compromise their individual state sovereignty. I hope I'm making this clear enough. It might be much more clear in the book. Article 1, Section 8. There's less than 17 enumerated powers given to our Congress. Does anybody here know how many bills were introduced, or at least brought into consideration to one extent or another last year in Congress? I've heard all kinds of numbers, but every one of them was way up in the thousands. Well, if government only exists to protect our rights, and if Congress only has 17 enumerated powers, do you really think that 5,000 bills were introduced solely to protect our rights? And do you think that they were all introduced in accordance with the U.S. Constitution? Of course not. Last year, Speaker of the House Pelosi was asked by a journalist, can you please point to the authority in the United States Constitution? Can you please cite the authority for this health care bill in the U.S. Constitution? She looked at the reporter. Did y'all hear this? You know what she said? Speaker of the House Pelosi looked at the reporter and said, "Are you serious?" She said, "Is that a serious question?" She looked at him like he had two heads. What's so scary is that Speaker of the House Pelosi was being dead serious. She asked this journalist, "Are you serious?" And when he said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm dead serious. I am serious. I want to know about the constitutionality of the health care bill," she looked at all the other reporters and said this, "For the record, that is not a serious question." I would like to point something out here. That woman took an oath to the United States Constitution. Not only did she take an oath to that Constitution, but our veterans here today, our elected leaders here today, myself included, took an oath to the Constitution. So while Nancy Pelosi doesn't think that the Constitution is anything to be serious about, our troops are overseas dying for it. Here it is. Here it is. I'm going to read something for you real quick. I'm going to try to read it off my BlackBerry. Hope it's still here. Here it is. This is the oath that my two buddies took that eventually led to their deaths. Just to kind of put it in perspective. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. One thing I'd like to point out, the first thing that came in that oath is swearing allegiance to the United States Constitution. Everything else you can only do if and only if they all swear allegiance to the Constitution as well. So when the National Guard goes down to New Orleans and confiscates the firearms of private individuals, that was, in fact, unconstitutional. And when Nancy Pelosi tells reporters in essentially all of America that questions about the Constitution, how the Constitution relates to things that she's trying to do, when she says that questions about the Constitution aren't serious, I can only assume that she has crossed a line and she is working to subvert my Constitution. And I believe that that would qualify her as a domestic enemy. And I'm not angry because she's a Democrat. The Constitution belongs to Democrats too. The Constitution belongs to Republicans too. That's all of our Constitution. That is a contract between us and our government to protect us from our government. And they've run amok with it and they've trampled all over it. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees to each state a Republican form of government. And in order to do that, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but in order to do that, states have to be sovereign just in order to do that. Then there's the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment was kind of stolen from the Articles of Confederation, which was America's first form of government. And it says, basically, I'm going to paraphrase it for you. The 10th Amendment says that all powers not delegated to the federal government nor prohibited to the states are reserved to the states or the people respectively. What that means is anything that was not specifically given to our federal government becomes immediately a state issue. Immediately, by default, it is a state issue. So our Congress has 17 powers that fit in this little hole up here. Everything outside of this little hole of powers that they have, that's authority that our state representative over here has. So when our federal government starts telling us what light bulbs we can and can't have, immediately we should all be able to recognize that as unconstitutional. When they start trying to tell us what kind of cars we can and can't drive, immediately we can recognize that as being unconstitutional. And anybody who's preaching that from Washington, D.C. needs to be immediately removed from office because they're a danger and they're a threat to all of our freedom.